Thank you for joining us this evening. We do have exclusive details, new details about that shooting rampage over the weekend that we will share with you coming up in just a moment. Details about how it started and what happened that night. But first, tonight, Global News has obtained recordings of the calls sent out by emergency dispatchers on the night the shooting rampage began, that Saturday evening. They reveal frantic efforts to respond to the active shooter scenario and to several fires. Elizabeth McSheffrey has that story and a warning that some of what you'll hear is disturbing and relates to victim injuries. Elizabeth.
Thank you, Sarah. The recordings paint a horrific picture behind the scenes of first responders' efforts to capture the shooter, snuff out fires, and get help to the wounded. They come from Broadcastify. That's a website that monitors and plays emergency communications online. We know the first call went out from dispatchers at 10:26 p.m. on April 18th. It reported gunshots in Portapique. At this point, flames and a structure fire have all been reported, and by 11 p.m.
RCMP are requesting more ambulances, probably one more coming and then at least one more standby.
We know there's an armed assailant, and at 11:11 p.m. we hear more about the chaos and civilian injuries.
It's very vague what's going on down there, but there is for sure multiple patients around there.
The shooter is still on the loose, his whereabouts unknown as of 11:21 p.m.
Do we know if these caught the assailant? No, not for sure. It's taking quite a ways, the actual house. They're bringing the victims out to that intersection from the actual scene, but no, they don't know if they've caught him. I don't know.
It's around 11:30 p.m. that Nova Scotia RCMP tweet they're responding to a firearms complaint in the area, and they're asking the public to lock their doors and stay inside. This is all still in Portapique, but we know, of course, that the spree spanned several communities. It's not until 8 a.m. on April 19th that RCMP tweet out the words active shooter, and the recordings from that morning show the gunman is on the move.
Okay, thanks so much, Elizabeth. That is Elizabeth McSheffrey live in our Halifax studio this evening. There's been a great deal of criticism about the way that police communicated with the public as all of this was unfolding. For reaction to that now, we are going to be speaking with Greg Markey, a police historian with the University of New Brunswick, who's joining us this evening from his home in... for joining us.
Hello.
So we now know that police learned, we've got exclusive details from Global News, that police learned that the shooter was wearing a police uniform and driving a mock cruiser at 7 a.m. on Sunday. So knowing that, Greg, do you think it would have been better to have sent that emergency alert much earlier than they did, try to prepare it at 10:15?
Well, yeah, with hindsight, I mean, sure. I mean, 4.5 hours go by before they actually stop the situation. It's very tragic all around, and I understand there were some victims who were lost that morning. So we'd like to know more about how EMO works with the RCMP. I guess we'd like to know more about that, but it seems that with today's technology, it would have been able to do that. They would have been able to do that. Not everyone's on Twitter. Twitter's a great device, but not everyone has it. And I think a general alert, the type of thing they do with an Amber Alert with a missing child or an abducted child, probably should have gone out that morning. But again, it was a very evolving situation.
So listen, we didn't hear from Nova Scotia RCMP today. We understand the force is under tremendous strain, having lost one of their own, having another officer injured in this attack, and of course this massive investigation that's underway. So understanding all of that, I just wonder if you think that it's appropriate for police to not be speaking to the public on a day like today after an incident like this.
It's tough. I mean, I think they were trying early on to try to brief the public. They were probably learning things as well. I think there's a lot of stress in our communities because of the COVID-19 to begin with, and this is totally unprecedented, this loss of life. It went over a large area. Seems a lot of it's random. So I think, again, this might be more a communications expert you need, but I think that the police should be talking to the public each day, maybe taking an example from our Prime Minister and some of our other public officials who are speaking to Canadians to allay a lot of their concerns. Hopefully we'll hear more from them tomorrow. There's certainly still a lot of unknowns about this story.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Greg, thanks so much for your perspective this evening. We really appreciate it. That is Greg Markey, a professor of history at the University of New Brunswick, joining us live this evening from his home in Rothesay. So as we mentioned off the top, we're learning exclusive new details about these devastating shootings in Nova Scotia. The gunman's 13-hour-long killing spree began with domestic violence. For more on this developing story, we are going to now go to Mercedes Stevenson, Global's Ottawa bureau chief and our national security expert. Mercedes, let's begin with what do we know about what happened that night?
Well, Sarah, here's what we know. There was a party, and we know that the shooter and his girlfriend were at that party. And at that point, Mr. Wortman began to argue with his domestic partner, with his girlfriend. At some point, they left and went back to his cottage, which was nearby to where the party was being held. At that point, he escalated and became violent. He assaulted his girlfriend, he tied her up, and she managed to escape from that, Sarah, and run into the woods. At some point after that, Mr. Wortman goes back to the house where the party was held, and he begins shooting and killing people. There's a bit of a black hole after that, and that we don't know what exactly happened. But we do know that at 7 a.m. the next morning, the police found Mr. Wortman's girlfriend. She was the one who told him at that point that there was a possibility he was dressed as a police officer and driving a fake police cruiser. That drastically changed the investigation, as you can imagine, because they weren't looking for somebody who looked like a legitimate RCMP officer. So after spending all night outside hiding from Mr. Wortman, she manages to provide this critical information, including the photograph that we all saw on social media and on Twitter. She is the person who gave that to police, according to my sources. Police then began looking for Mr. Wortman as a fake police officer, somebody who's out impersonating the RCMP. I can tell you that at that point, again, it gets very fuzzy with what happened next. But at some point, Constable Stevenson spots him. I am told that she rams him. There is an exchange of fire. He shoots her and kills her. Then he pulls into a gas station after carjacking another car, and that is the silver car that he was in at the end. And at that point, an RCMP ERT officer and a dog officer, one of the canines, pulls in. They're gassing up. They look across and realize that it's the shooter in the car across from them. The shooter goes for his gun, and at that point, the RCMP open fire and kill him.
Remarkable new details obtained by Global News. Mercedes, before I let you go, what do we know about the guns that were used in this attack?
So we don't know how he obtained the guns, but we do know that Mr. Wortman had a variety of different firearms on him, including a handgun, a shotgun, and a rifle. Now, the RCMP have come out and said that to their awareness, he didn't have a license for those. So certainly one avenue of the investigation will be how he managed to obtain those firearms.
Okay, thank you so much for this. That is Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stevenson joining us this evening from Ottawa. We also have surveillance video from a trading post in Millbrook First Nation, which may show more of the shooter's movements that Sunday morning. It appears to show the gunman make a brief pit stop to change clothing just minutes before he was in that shootout with police that Mercedes just described. A neighbor says if it wasn't for a coffee and cigar break with a friend, he may have been another victim. Jesse Thomas has that story.
Lloyd Johnson isn't on Twitter, but his daughter, who lives in Cape Breton, is. When she saw Nova Scotia's RCMP tweet that the killer might be in the Brookfield area, worried, she called her father.
Dad, get home as soon as possible. There's a killer at large. So I thought about it, and I kind of finished my cigar. And then I headed home.
Video surveillance posted to Facebook from the Mi'kma'ki Trading Post in Millbrook First Nation appears to show the suspect pull over along Highway 2, adjacent to Johnson's driveway, merely 10 yards from his front door. He calmly removes his jacket and puts on a safety vest.
She called at 10:41. The killer arrived at 10:52, and I got here at 11:10, shortly after he left.
Not one to rush or panic, Johnson says he finished his coffee and smoke with his friend before heeding his daughter's advice.
I think the cigar saved my life because I just hesitated for a bit to finish my cigar. And
Next door at Keith's Gas Bar, manager Kristen Sillaboy believes it was the killer in the video. She received a text message from a friend Sunday whose brother is an RCMP officer saying the suspect was in the area and to go into lockdown.
As a team, we decided that it would be best to close, and we closed at 10:40 a.m.
The 3 employees closed the gas bar and went home.
I really felt like we were being watched over at that moment.
It wasn't until Tuesday that Johnson saw the surveillance footage, and it hit him how close he was to the apparent killer.
Thinking about it, you know, this would have been crime scene number 17, and I would have been victim number 23.
The surveillance video shows the vehicle heading south towards Shubenacadie. 51 kilometers away at the big stop in Enfield, RCMP officers stormed the scene and shot and killed the suspect. Jesse Thomas, Global News, Millbrook First Nation.
The RCMP have opened up a tip line for information about this mass shooting. They are asking anyone with any information, no matter how insignificant it may seem, to give them a call. Officers are staffing the phone lines, but if you get a voicemail, you can always leave a message and an investigator will call you back. A Dieppe, New Brunswick man is recalling a run-in with the man responsible for this mass shooting. He sells decommissioned police cars and believes the shooter tried to buy an old police car from him just over a year and a half ago. Shelley Steves explains.
That gray one there and then
Bernard Kane has been selling decommissioned police cars for decades from his surplus shop in Dieppe, New Brunswick.
I buy a surplus from the government of Canada and I resell it.
He says anyone can buy an old police car like these ones from his lot because they're completely stripped of all policing decals and equipment. Most of the people looking to buy are young men in their 20s looking for a cheap, fast car. So about 20 months ago, when a man dressed in a gray suit in his late 40s walked through his door looking to buy one, he found it a little odd.
Right away I said, what the hell do you want a police car for? And he said, I'm a retired RCMP.
Kane said he took the man at his word. Turns out the man was in fact the Nova Scotia denturist who went on a shooting spree, killing at least 22 people last weekend. Kane says he instantly recognized him.
They showed pictures of him on television, and I said, well, that's the guy that was here in the gray suit, the one to buy the Mountie car.
Kane says the man told him he was looking to buy an inexpensive old police car for about $1,500.
The reason that he wanted the car was to put on his property to keep the locals from stealing everything out of his cottages.
Kane says he never did sell him a car, nor did he question him any further about his claims to be a retired RCMP.
I wasn't interested. And when I told him how much I wanted for the car, he wasn't interested.
Kane believes the shooter could have purchased the car he used in the mass killings at a government surplus shop in Dartmouth.
He trimmed them up.
Kane says the man who walked into his shop that day,
very plain spoken, there wasn't anything crazy about him at all.
Shelley Steves, Global News.
RCMP detachments across the country are working with the National Police Federation to organize a nationwide day of mourning tomorrow. The union, representing roughly 20,000 Mounties, is asking the public to wear red and observe 2 minutes of silence in honor of the victims. The 2 minutes of silence will begin at 2 p.m. Atlantic time.